Okay, I want to talk about a different category of foods now, and again I want to stress that this is stuff you can eat every day. This is stuff you can get at your grocery store. Any grocery store carries these things. You can buy them in various size quantities, and so just know the number of people you're feeding, know the portion sizes. Again, if we have our power and our infrastructure and we have refrigeration, we're not talking about nearly the same problems. But here where we're at is, if we're going to stock up on foods, things that are highly perishable obviously aren't going to be around for very long. So if you want to have fresh fruits and vegetables on hand, that's great. I would do that every week so that you're always getting that. But while you're doing that and you're shopping, you want to start buying some of these things that are going to stick around a lot longer for you, so that you can use them in your daily meal prep, but also keep some kind of stacked back on hand and just kind of keep building that back stock, if you will, of longer term non-perishable things, and that way if you can't get to the grocery store or things are out of stock, whatever, that's going to give you that option of backing yourself up. And economic downturn, I mean, I've known people who've lost their jobs, but they had such a huge store of food set aside over a period of time that it wasn't a big problem for them to eat and eat well for months, if not longer, just because they had over a period of time stored and backed up this food. So let's look at some things that have a little bit longer shelf life, but maybe not as long as the canned foods and packaged foods we were looking at a few minutes ago. Tortillas really are a great storage food. These aren't going to last as long as a can of food, but these last a long time. When the bags are sealed up, these will last for months. Flour tortillas and corn tortillas, gosh, we've had some of these around for a long time, and they still taste good and they didn't spoil. And so I think just the way they're prepared, they just last a long time. They're going to last longer than bread by a long shot, and you can use them in a lot of ways that you might use bread. So I mean, bread's great, but it's perishable, and you're going to have to freeze it if you're going to keep it around. And typically people are going to have limited amounts of freezer space. I mean, if you're in an apartment, you probably got a refrigerator, something like what we've got right here, and there's just not a lot of freezer space there, and bread takes up a lot of space, so it's probably not the most bang for your buck as far as food storage goes. Might be fun, might be nice to have, but ultimately longer term food storage situation, it's not a good idea. If you like bread and you want to keep bread around, maybe consider making your own bread and keeping the ingredients for that on hand, like flour and salt and yeast, and you can make your own bread as you go, and that way you've always got fresh bread. A little more involved, but nice to have. Not the thing that I would worry about first. Let's talk a little bit more about healthy fats. Olive oil, probably one of the best things you can buy. All fat, as far as calories and macros go, very densely nutritious food, very healthy food for you. You can cook with it. You can eat it raw. I mean, as is. You can pour it right on top of your salad or whatever foods and eat it just like it is. People dip their bread in it. Really good for you. Pretty good sized container. They come in all sizes of containers, so purchase accordingly. This one in particular, back to that nutrition facts, we're looking at calories per serving of 120 and 133 servings in this container. So there's 16,000 calories right here. Good calories, shelf-stable calories, calories that this has got a good flavor to it. It's good for cooking and using as a flavoring, and certainly it's a nutritious food for you that will sit on the shelf and be stable. So that's a great item to stock up on. A lot of versatility there. Another one is coconut oil, which is a very healthy fat. Again, very calorie dense, and this is a large container of it. Again, so there, and this one's really fun because 120 calories per tablespoon and there are 170 servings. So there's 20,000, a little over 20,000 calories in that container right there. Again, very shelf stable, got a good flavor on its own. You can use that like you would butter. You can cook with it, you can flavor with it, and it's got a lot of healthy fats, and so it's a seriously big bang for your buck type of food, and it's not real expensive. You can buy smaller containers. This is a large one, but nice to have on hand because it can just sit on the shelf, and you know, you get a lot of calorie content there that's good for you, and relatively inexpensive in comparison. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, spices are essential when you're cooking, and you know, let's talk a minute here. You know, we're kind of evolving from the ready-to-eat foods into the semi-ready-to-eats and into foods that we're starting to have to cook and make meals out of. And so learning to cook and having recipes that you know you can cook that you're going to like and your family's going to like are important. And economically speaking, if you're going to buy ingredients rather than ready-made meals, you're going to save a lot of money. Granted, you're going to need to prepare them and spend a little more time in the kitchen to get there, but I think it's healthier and certainly less expensive, and a lot of these are going to be these shelf-stable items that you're going to be using as components to create a meal. A lot of people probably need to learn some cooking skills. I don't know. I was fortunate enough to grow up with parents that taught me to cook, and so I worked in the restaurant industry, and so I've got a lot of background in that, so I don't have a problem with cooking. But I think it's important to learn to cook. I think you're going to get a lot more nutrition out of cooking your own food versus buying ready-to-eat or heat-and-eat type foods that are highly processed and convenient for sure, more expensive definitely, and not necessarily as nutritious, because that's not really what the main goal was there. It was, you know, to make it convenient. So think about that. But you know, salt, pepper, garlic are some pretty basic staple spices. You can get along and do a lot of cooking with just those three. Certainly add to that if you have favorites and other things that you want to use or use on a regular basis. Again, this is about being able to cook and eat foods that you're familiar with, that you like to eat, and stocking up on these types of things and the ingredients so that you can have those on hand when times get tough, right? Okay. Something that I would think about, again, redundancy is the name of the game when it comes to this type of thing. So this is a big bag of powdered milk, is another shelf-stable ingredient that's going to make great. Now, maybe not everybody likes to drink powdered milk, but powdered milk's great for cooking and baking. Some people don't mind the taste of it. If that's the case, then great, you're in good shape. You can use this as a beverage. But this is something that'll hold up, and it'll give you a common ingredient in a lot of recipes that's going to be easy to sit on the shelf rather than have to have a perishable product in the refrigerator that's not going to last for an extended period of time. So I think these are always great, and you can portion these out into smaller portions, and I think it's just a really good product to keep around, and it doesn't cost a lot. We get into some more dry goods. This is just a smaller container of something called quinoa, which is a grain, and it's easy to cook. Cooks pretty easily and quickly. Similar to, I mean, it's a great substitute for like rice, and so I think it's a good nutrition food. Fairly easy to prepare. You cook it like rice, only it's quicker, and so I like having that kind of thing on hand. Again, shelf stable, can last for a long time, take what you need out of it, so I think that's a good product to keep around. Another thing, again, you know, the basic things, and I'm not going to pull them up here because we just happen to have large bags of them, but rice and beans, particularly brown rice and pinto beans, are easy to come by. They're fairly inexpensive. You can buy them in large quantities. I mean, you can get bags that are 20, 30, 40 pound bags of those types of staple goods. They last for almost indefinitely. Takes longer to cook. Rice is a 20-minute process. Beans are longer. You may need to soak beans overnight. Certainly something that you're going to want to put some flavoring to. But if you're eating rice and beans, you're in pretty good shape nutrition-wise for an extended period of time. And again, they hold well. They're inexpensive, easy to cook. But cook them, try them, make sure you like them. Don't just stock up on them and think, well, if the stuff hits the fan, we're good because we've got 200 pounds of rice and beans, and then you come to find out, yeah, this sucks. I don't like this, and now what are you going to do? So good to have. You can put them in 5-gallon buckets. They'll last for a long time. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the next category of foods that are semi-perishable but still have a long shelf life. So let's talk about a little bit different categories of food now. We're going to kind of advance along here. We've got into our sort of our immediate easy to eat foods, and we talked about things that you can actually carry with you if you need to leave. But if you're staying put, now we have a different set of foods that again have that long-term storage, and you can build them up over time depending on your budget. You might just pick up another $10 worth of things every week at the store and just keep adding to that. And so if we're just able to stay home, and it's just like we're dealing with a virus outbreak, a health issue right now in this particular series, which is kind of what spurred this conversation, and we're trying to isolate or stay away from each other so that we don't spread this around, and you need to kind of stay put and stay home and stock up, and that's what we're talking about. So Anissa and I were gone for a couple of weeks recently out of town training people. And when we got back, we didn't have any groceries because we were gone for a long time, and so we stopped by the store and picked some things up. And in that period of 2 weeks that we were gone is when a lot of this sort of started ramping up and getting more serious. And so they started, people were starting to make runs on things in the stores, and you're seeing pictures of store shelves that are just bare. And so there's been obviously some fear and some anxiety going on about food, and so that's what kind of spurred this conversation. Is just the reason we're not panicking and we're not concerned is because we do this on a regular basis. We stock up and we keep food ahead, and so we're largely unaffected by an event like this because we can go ahead and self-isolate, which we kind of do anyway. I mean, there's times that we don't leave the house for a week, not unusual, because we've got everything we need right here. We work from home and we have that advantage. So this is for those who need to start thinking about being a little bit more prepared for scenarios like this, so that they don't have the panic and the concern, and your economics dictate that you're struggling to kind of come up with the extra food and things like that. So this is just about adding a little bit every week depending on your budget. So just kind of looking at some of the good things, and specifically things that we try to stock up on, so that makes it easier for us to weather the storm, so to speak. So some sort of semi-perishable things, but still things that will hold for long term, and a little bit more fresh type things is the next kind of category here. So produce. Now there's a lot of different types of produce, and everybody has their things they like and they don't like about produce. But what I want to talk about is produce that you can purchase that will sit for a longer period of time, that maybe doesn't even need to be refrigerated, and will hold out and will give you good calories and good nutrition, and is relatively inexpensive. And so this boils down to some of your likes and dislikes again. But Anissa and I always like to keep a fairly good quantity of these on hand because we do enjoy eating them, and they also hold well. And so the good old humble potato is a great example of that. You get a lot of carbohydrates and fiber out of this. It's filling, and this is such a versatile food that you can, it's an ingredient that can go into a lot of things. I mean, if nothing else, you make baked potatoes, and you have your stuffed bakers, and so that can be virtually anything that you want to put on or in a potato to make a meal. And kids like potatoes, and certainly you can boil them and mash them and bake them and fry them, and there's just so many things you can do with a potato. It's kind of remarkable, but super cheap to buy, hold up for a long time. These will help sit around for months. Keep them in the dark. That's a great way to stick them in the closet or under the bed or whatever. They don't want to be out where there's light because they'll start to turn green, and that makes them less palatable. So they will eventually dry out over time. So you need to make sure you're rotating them, but these are a great long-term storage food. So we always have, and there's obviously different types. You can get the bakers, you can get the reds, the yellows, whatever, and use them for various ingredients and even be the main course. Another thing is onions. We enjoy onions. Onions are something that will stick around for a long time. They don't need to be refrigerated. They're relatively inexpensive, and they're a great ingredient for many dishes. Certainly you can eat them cooked or raw, so that makes them a really great storage food. Another food that I don't have sitting here, but certainly worth mentioning, is carrots. And carrots, again, people typically will keep them in the refrigerator. They don't necessarily need to be in the refrigerator. If you're buying them in the store, a lot of times you'll see them just sitting on a shelf. And another item that will hold up for a relatively long period of time, months, and a great ingredient, and pretty popular staple food. So inexpensive, and you can certainly buy them in anywhere from little bitty bags to great big bags, just depending on what it is you're trying to do. But it's an everyday food item too, so make sure you're using it and replenishing and rotating, so you're keeping a fairly fresh stock on hand, so that if you do have to stop going to the store for whatever reason, you've got a nice fresh supply there. Another one that I like, certainly didn't as a kid, but I do now as an adult, is cabbage. And cabbages are, again, relatively inexpensive. They're good and nutritious. They hold up real well for storage. You can keep them in the refrigerator, or you can keep them in a cool place, and they'll hold up for a long time. And you can certainly use them in a lot of dishes. And I mean, you can eat it raw. You can eat it as a salad. You can cook it, and it's got a good flavor. And it can be put in stews and soups, and just a lot of different ways to use this. Culturally, there's people around the world that this is a staple item, and they eat a lot of it. So great food for that long term. Another one that I didn't like as a kid, but I really like now, is Brussels sprouts. And I always thought of them as mini cabbages, and I wasn't a cabbage eater either, so why would I eat Brussels sprouts? That's just a bunch of little cabbages. But they really have a very good flavor. I like to cut them in half and saute them and soften them up, and my whole family eats these, and it's kind of a fight over who gets all the Brussels sprouts when we cook them. And these will hold up for a really long time, relatively inexpensive, and good nutritious food, so I think it's worth mentioning. So these are some fresh produce items that are not perishable, that are very inexpensive. They're very staple good type foods, and I think they're really something that I would keep on hand. We do keep on hand on a regular basis, and we use them on a daily, weekly basis in our cooking. So I think it's a great item to add to the list if you're a fan, if you will. So one of the last things I want to talk about in this particular video is water. And I think it's, here's the deal. Water is more important than anything we just talked about. Without water, we won't be around here to eat this food. And it's certainly something that you need to have on hand. And, we're all used to being able to just walk over to the sink and flip the valve and have all the water we want. But what if the water isn't that convenient? What if it's been shut off? What if something's interrupted our water service? It's important to have some storage of water on hand, and I would say, as a rule of thumb, about a gallon per person per day is pretty prudent. Again, you can carry this as small drinkable water bottles. You can carry this as 1 gallon containers. Again, a lot of this stuff is, make sure this is easy to carry and move around if necessary by anybody. So, not just somebody my size, but think about it in terms of if you had to carry this food somewhere or move it, could a 10-year-old do it? And so I think that's a good rule of thumb, is, if it's in quantities and or in containers that you're storing it in that are small enough that somebody that size can pick it up and carry it. That's a good rule of thumb. So make sure you have plenty of water. Again, if you go with a 72-hour scenario, think about 3 gallons of water per per person for a 3-day scenario, and then build from there and get into some longer term storage and larger quantities of water. And if you want to, you can even go out and get larger containers to hold water, you know, 5-6 gallons. Again, they're going to weigh more. A 5-gallon bucket of water is about 40 pounds. So you got to think about, you know, being able to move something like that or make it useful. And it could be your you know, container is something you're pouring that into smaller containers as you go to use it, but it's just a larger, convenient for storage container. So if you enjoyed this video, please share it, and hopefully it's informative and it helps people. That's the intent of the video, is to help you become more self-reliant, more independent, more able to take care of yourself in a case of an event like this virus outbreak that we have currently. And certainly there's other events that would, you know, categorize in to you know, have to be able to keep these kind of supplies on hand. We're going to do more videos. We'll do a series of videos, and we're going to talk about types of gear and equipment to have on hand, starting again with simple, smaller, inexpensive things, and then moving on up as you build your self-reliance on you know, kind of compounding and building on this over time when you have the funds and can do this. Again, you know, it's great if you've got the money to just go out and get it all at once. Fantastic. If not, then let's just start from a basic scenario and then build back up over time to get into some multiple contingencies. And again, this is just bulletproofing your, you know, family, yourselves, and making yourself a little more independent of potential problems, and so that you can weather things a lot more easy, whether it be from a health standpoint, a financial standpoint, you know, a weather-related issue, whatever the case may be. So we're going to kind of go into, you know, some redundancies and some things that are going to cross over for different types of events coming forward. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you give us a thumbs up if you like it. Certainly share this video with others if it's going to help them, and stay safe out there, and we'll see you on the next video.